Not longer.
We're going live. Hey, everybody. Good to have you back. I know I'm getting started just a tad early, so I just thought I'd jump on here and see how everybody's doing tonight. I know that it's a Friday night, and with COVID opening up and some of our, especially if you're in one of our, you're out in front of enemy lines with a conservative governor, you're probably out having a good time tonight, enjoying dinner out in maybe a restaurant for once in the last 2.5 months. But if you're still behind enemy liberal states where our governors might be holding back a little bit more, well, God bless you for joining me here tonight. One thing I did want to let everybody know, and we are going to be giving away 3 books tonight. And it's just kind of a reminder. I'm going to be giving away 3 autographed copies of 13 Hours. To enter your chance to win, all you have to do is tag your friends or start a watch party to help promote the video. The top 3 participants basically will be announced at the end of the video tonight, and let you know who's going to take home, going to get those 3 books. But basically, start a watch party, tag your friends. The more, the merrier. The top 3 who bring the most people to the game tonight will be getting a book for themselves, an autographed book. So remember that, as well as I say all the time, the Shadow Warriors Project. Go to shadowwarriorsproject.org. Check us out. We will be launching our new landing page for our dog program. That'll be starting up shortly. We do have a few recipients, and we're going to be doing a few things around the country this summer. We've got a couple events here in Colorado Springs, or one event in Colorado Springs in June. Check out our website. We'll be announcing that just shortly, as well as September or August 22nd. We're going to be doing a Sporting Clays event to raise money. It'll be our kind of big galley, so to speak, to raise money for Shadow Warriors, as well as in Lubbock, Texas, hosted by the Jones family. They're going to be our sponsors. They're hosting us down there, and we are going to be doing a little fundraiser down in Lubbock, Texas, or just outside of Lubbock. And we've got a new facility that's going to be hopefully up and running by then down there for training dogs and working with dogs for all our veterans, and for Baden K9 and for Shadow Warriors Project as well. And then from there, we're going to be going to, and it hasn't canceled yet. I know they rescheduled it, but it's going to be Charlie Daniels is going to be having Volunteer Jam in Nashville on September 14th. So if you haven't got your tickets, you should buy them and get to that great lineup of country music stars that are going to be there. Some of the older ones, some of the newer ones, but it's a great program, and we are working with them. So we may be donating a dog on stage at Volunteer Jam. Then we are going to be heading straight from there to Myrtle Beach for Carolina Country Music Fest, which is a phenomenal organization, another great country music event. Last year, that's where I got Roan, and we, along with Special Operations Wounded Warriors, who donated Roan to me, we are going to be partnering together and giving a dog away to a recipient. It's going to be a surprise for him on stage in front of 30,000 people. So if you haven't, jump out there, get your tickets, check out those things. We're going to have a great time this summer. We're going to kick this COVID thing in the butt, get past it, and move forward. So with that all said, let's get started on the book. We're going to do the last 2 chapters. We are into chapter 12, Mortars. And we're going to do chapter 13. And then Wednesday, we will come back and do the epilogue and do a final kind of laid back question and answer time. But let's get started with chapter 12. As the evacuation plans took shape inside Building C, Glenn Doherty knew that he'd soon be leaving the annex, and that his friends on the Benghazi security team would remain behind for a second plane. They might connect when they all reached Tripoli, but Glenn wasn't the sort of man who passed up an opportunity to see a pal. Rome was directly above his head on the building's roof. Maybe they'd have enough time for a brief visit. On the roof, Roan stood in a half-crouch, partially shielded by the parapet at the far northwest corner, his helmet and body armor securely in place. A 20-pound belt-fed machine gun in his hands. I was a foot to Roan's right, similarly dropped. At our feet were several thousand rounds of linked ammunition, and our eyes were darting left and right as we looked out over Zombieland. In the event of an attack, we'd choreographed a reloading strategy under which one would signal the other before ducking down behind the parapet. While one reloaded, the other would increase his rate of fire to keep rounds flying and their enemies on their heels. The third man on Building C up on the rooftop was Dave Ubben, who stood watch with his assault rifle at the far northeast corner, near the top of the ladder. Building C was built on an angle at the annex's rear wall, so from his post, Ubben was less than 10 yards from the wall, while Roan and Oz were about twice as far. Ubben's post was about 45 feet to the right of myself. At that distance, I and Ubben could barely see each other in the early morning darkness. But with each passing minute, visibility faintly improved. As 5 a.m. passed, more than 7 hours into the battle, the twilight before sunrise silhouetting the big DS agent with a faint orange glow when I looked in his direction. I heard someone coming up the ladder. I looked over to see the outline of a man climbing over the parapet next to Ubben. The man exchanged a few words with the DS agent, and Ubben pointed toward myself and Roan. Glenn walked across the rooftop to the northwest corner, flashing that smile that he has to Roan. The two former SEALs shook hands and then pulled each other close for a chest bump, arms around the back kind of man hug. Roan introduced Glenn to me. Glenn's a sniper too, Roan said. We need another good shooter up here. Well, hopefully we don't need you, I told Glenn as we shook hands. Now, this is the first time I really got to meet Glenn. I knew him by reputation only. So these few minutes were the only time that I really got to know him. But his reputation preceded him. I mean, he was always that guy that Roan had talked about. After some small talk, Glenn turned to walk across the rooftop to look out over the building's front door. Roan and myself shifted our attention back towards Zombieland. And then everything changed. A rocket-propelled grenade or a mortar slammed outside the annex's north wall, exploding in almost a direct line in front of Roan and myself. Immediately, shots flew at us on Building C from unseen gunmen hiding in Zombieland. Roan never hesitated. He opened up full bore with the machine gun, swiveling his powerful upper body left and right, flooding bullets and tracers into the attackers' positions. He laid down a withering base of fire in repeated bursts of 5 to 7 rounds, methodically and lethally shooting across the open area beyond the north wall. If the attackers had thought they'd catch the Americans sleeping at dawn, well, Roan was going to let him know he was wide awake and ready to fight. The relentless automatic fire of Roan's machine gun echoed in my ears. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. I responded as quickly as Roan, blasting the enemy with steady fire from my assault rifle. I couldn't see the attackers, so I aimed where I saw muzzle flashes, pinpoints of light that shone from bullets that were coming at us. Myself and Roan kept firing. Then came a second explosion. A mortar landed almost directly atop the north wall, perhaps 30 feet in front of Dave Ubben's post. Dave Ubben yells out, "I'm hit! I'm hit!" Between shots, I glanced to the right and I saw the wounded DS agent sitting on the box that we used to step up from the rooftop over the parapet to the ladder. Ubben had his back to Zombieland, his hands pressed to his head. He didn't look critically wounded, so I resolved to help him as soon as the shooting stopped. After a radio call ordered all State Department staffers to assemble for evacuation, Jack walked to the DS agent, intending to bid him goodbye. The DS agent had stripped off some of his heavy gear, so Jack helped it by carrying it to the ladder. The DS agent swung himself over the roof onto the highest rungs, and Jack reached out to his gear. At that moment, the first explosion and shockwave rocked the annex. Jack was about 50 yards away, and he felt and heard the blast almost as strongly as the men on Building C. A black plume of smoke rose from where the explosion hit. The DS agent scrambled down the ladder to the northeast corner of Building D, while Jack tried to figure out what was happening. I could have been an RPG, he thought, or maybe somebody put an explosive next to the northern wall to breach it and get in there from Zombieland. Jack looked to his right, to the roof of Building C. He saw Roan and myself rocking and rolling, shooting hard into the dirt alleyway that cut through Zombieland. Jack couldn't see the enemy, but he raised his assault rifle and fired in the same direction, adding his gun to the fight. Jack directed his fire by following Roan's tracer rounds, but stopped when he didn't see a clear target. The second explosion came less than 30 seconds after the first, different and more powerful. Jack recognized this was unlike the previous two firefights at the annex. After two thwarted assaults on the annex from the east with gelatina bombs and AK-47s, the attackers had changed their tactics, improved their planning, and increased their firepower. The second bomb's detonation, so close to the first, and accompanied by waves of rifle fire from the north part of Zombieland, also suggested a spike in military sophistication and an unsettling level of precision and coordination. Jack saw and heard the second explosion when it hit the top of the annex wall, followed by a shockwave and black smoke. He saw Roan and Oz still firing into Zombieland, but Jack wanted a better view before he resumed shooting, so he held his fire. The cause of the second explosion didn't immediately register with Jack. Then his radio crackled with an explanation that made it clear. One of the fellow operators yelled, "Mortars! Mortars!" When Tonto first called out incoming, he did so as a question, because he wasn't sure what he'd heard. Although he picked up a disturbing sound in the distance, Tonto thought it might have been caused by something as innocent as one of his fellow operators stepping on a sealed bag of Fritos. In Iraq, Tonto had grown used to the shush or whoosh sound of rockets being fired, and to the clunk of mortars being dropped into tubes for launching. Although Tonto had heard something like a whoosh, with his compromised hearing, it didn't sound like anything he'd heard before in combat. Still, the sound made him flinch and take a knee on the rooftop of Building A. And when the shell hit, perhaps 20 seconds after he first heard the whoosh, Tonto turned toward Building C and saw the men on the roof engaging the enemy. Our gun sounded like buzzsaws cutting through cordwood. He moved to the northern edge of the building A, found a clear line of sight into Zombieland, and added another gun into the battle. But only after a few bursts he stopped. Wait a second, Tonto thought. If that was us, we'd fire mortars and set up an assault. And if they were going to assault, it's going to come from the field to the south that I'm supposed to be watching. He spun around and positioned himself to look out over the south wall. Tonto saw a 10-car militia motorcade speed away from the annex to points unknown. He hoped that some were trying to locate the source of the mortars, but he considered it as just likely that most or all were fleeing, like cockroaches when you turn the lights on, is what Tonto thought. Then came another whoosh. Even with his damaged ears, before the second explosion, Tonto knew what was happening. Someone came over the radio and asked if they were under attack by RPGs. No, it was mortar, Tonto said. Then the questionnaire repeated the inquiry. Tonto came across the radio again, loud and clear. Mortars, mortars, mortars. On building C, after the second explosion, I dropped down below the lip of the parapet to replace the spent magazine on my assault rifle. As planned, Roan never hesitated. He remained upright and fully engaged, increasing his rate of fire to mask the temporary loss of my firearm. Roan gripped the black machine gun with his meaty hands, holding the butt hard against his shoulder with a deafening growl. The weapon ingested belt-fed rounds and spewed them with deadly intent into zombie land. Roan's thick biceps flexed as he moved left and right. Bullets and white smoke poured from the barrel. Roan kept shooting as I reloaded. Defending the men on the building and towers to his left, right, and rear, protecting the men and women below his feet inside building C, exposing himself to fire. Roan delivered on his promise to unleash hate on the enemy attackers who were trying to kill him. Then another mortar exploded. Roan stopped firing. After two near misses, the attackers had adjusted their aim with devastating results. The third explosion was a direct mortar hit on the roof of Building C, halfway between myself and Roan in the northwest corner and Dave Ubin in the northeast corner. When the mortar exploded on the roof, I had just finished reloading. I was raising up out of my squatting position to resume shooting. The ear-splitting blast kind of threw me back and off balance, knocking me down to one knee. I somehow caught myself before going down completely. Through the cloud of black smoke, I glanced left. The blast had hit Roan. The former SEAL with the King Leonidas beard, who'd extended his stay in Benghazi to help protect Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens, who intended to retire from GRS operator trips to work with his wife, who was eager to raise his infant son and see his two older boys grow into men, who instinctively and compulsively watched over his fellow operators, who led the rescue charge into the compound, who searched through the burning building for two missing men, and who answered the first two explosions by raising with the machine gun and returning fire. He absorbed the deadly concussive force of the explosion. I saw Roan lying on his side, curled in a fetal position, motionless and silent. His machine gun was blown from his hands, broken somewhere on the grassy field below. Roan faced away from me, toward the parapet, so I couldn't tell if he was conscious. But if Roan wasn't raising to his feet and returning to the fight, I knew that he had the reason, and I had to fear the worst. I looked toward the northeast corner, but through the smoke I couldn't see if Dave Ubin remained on the box near the ladder. I heard no sound from that direction, and I knew that Glenn Doherty was somewhere toward the south side of the roof. But he neither saw nor heard the Tripoli operator I'd met less than 5 minutes before. I collected my bomb-scattered senses and focused on my training. I knew that before I could help anyone else, I needed to make sure that we weren't being overran. My first move would be to step into Roan's place to prevent the enemies from thinking that the American defenders were beaten and the annex was defenseless. Engage, I told myself. Get your rifle up and get into the fight. I glanced again at Roan. If he's badly hurt, press the fight until we can take care of him. Now get up and engage. I clenched my assault rifle's pistol grip with my right hand, but as I lifted my left arm to grab the black metal barrel, nothing happened. I tried again, but my left hand refused to answer my command. I looked down and saw my left forearm blown open about 4 inches from the wrist. My hand and wrist hung in a gruesome 45-degree angle from the rest of my arm. Not really realizing how badly I'd been hurt and determined to resume shooting, I tried repeatedly to flip my left hand onto the barrel, but it flopped uselessly back down. I stared at it in shock, not comprehending that the mortar had torn through the flesh of my left arm. Blown away 2 inches of my radial bone, destroyed part of the radial nerve and fractured the ulna. Blood bathed the pulpy mess. Before I could react, another mortar hit the roof to my right. A fourth explosion in quick succession. It released a blinding white ball of light. I looked over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of Glenn. The Tripoli operator faced the opposite direction, about 4 to 5 steps away. When the blast hit, it knocked Glenn face down onto the poured concrete roof. At first, I thought that Glenn had gone down on his own will to take cover. But then I realized that Glenn hadn't broken his fall. The explosion's concussion had felled him like an axe cut in oak. Based on where Glenn fell, it seemed plausible that he'd tried to return to the north parapet to follow his operators after the third explosion. He might have heard the incoming next rooftop mortar and turned to the south in an unsuccessful attempt to avoid his blast. However, it transpired the former SEAL had the infectious smile and abundant best friends who served bravely in the Gulf War, who soared airborne on skis, surfboards, and good times, who came eagerly from Tripoli to help his fellow Americans, lay stationary and silent, arms at his side, atop Building C. I still didn't know what happened to Dave Ubben. After the second direct hit on the rooftop, I remained hunched over, bleeding, but not conscious of pain. I wheeled around to the north to face Zombieland, and again I told myself that Building C had dropped out of the fight, and it was my job to change that. Even before I could try to help Roan, Glenn, or myself, or even look for Dave Ubben. Still refusing to accept my injury, I tried again to raise my weapon, lifting my left arm and awkwardly flipping up my hand, as though I were playing the child's game of catching a ball with a string on a wooden cup. Each time it failed. In came another mortar, the fifth explosive in perhaps 90 seconds, and the third to land squarely atop Building C. I heard the mortar approaching the roof. I turned away from the sound and caught only a glimpse of the blinding flash. When the flying bomb reached the bottom of its arc and exploded, I felt as though I'd been stung all over my body by 1,000 metal bees. Shrapnel cut into the right side of my neck near my carotid artery. A jagged piece evaded my body armor to embed itself a 1/4 inch into my chest between my pectoral muscles. Another piece pierced the left center of my abdomen, cutting into the diaphragm. Shrapnel entered my left side 6 inches below the armpit, and more metal struck me in almost the same place on the right side. 8 to 10 fragments struck my right leg, one high on my groin near the femoral artery. 4 or 5 pierced my left leg from my calf up to the thigh. Small bloody holes dotted both arms and shoulders, as though I were a boxer whose opponent had put a nail in the thumb of his glove. One piece of shrapnel struck my right hip, sneaking between my belt line and cell phone in my front pocket. 5 small bits slashed my cheeks, just below my night vision goggles, 3 under the right eye and 2 under the left. A piece sliced off the tip of my nose. Shocked by pain that seemed to inflame every nerve, oozing blood from more places than I can imagine, I dove for cover against the parapet on the northeast west corner. I didn't hear shooting from Zombieland, and I began to accept that my hand was hopeless. I stopped trying to raise my gun. Instead, I dragged myself up to a sitting position and saw Roan nearby, curled on his side. I reached out for Roan's leg. I was still too weak to pull Roan toward me, so I quieted my mind of pain to search for a pulse on Roan's femoral artery. I found none. Roan made no sound and no movement since I first saw him down on his side. As I hunted for Roan's pulse, I felt wetness all around me. I thought, oh shit, I'm bleeding out. I reached down to the rooftop with my right hand and noticed, to my relief, that the wetness was cool to the touch. Fresh blood, I knew, would be warm and sticky. I realized that the rooftop, was drenched not with blood but water. The mortars had punched multiple holes in the 250-gallon tank atop the rooftop, as water drained around me. I wasn't bleeding out, but I knew that I might be soon. I looked down at the blood flowing from my damaged arm, and I told myself to staunch it. I remembered that I'd left my go bag with my primary medical kit in the tower with Tig, but I had a smaller kit attached to my right side on my tactical vest. Inside were one-piece combat tourniquet, Kerlix gauze, a chest dressing, and a nasal tube to create an open airway. I unzipped the kit and tried to apply the tourniquet to my left arm by using my only working right hand. The tourniquet was designed for one-handed application, but I was too weak or too deep into shock to use it properly. At this point, I saw a dark outline of a man hop over the top of the ladder. Unsure if it was friend or foe, I dropped the tourniquet and looked around in the heavy twilight haze for my gun. Spotting the assault rifle near my feet, I reached out for it. Alone at the Northeast Tower, Tig had spent much of the previous 2 hours acting as a remote shepherd, keeping watch over the sheep pens for approaching attackers. He'd also been eyeing the dirt pathways of Zombieland beyond the wall. His back ached. His lungs hurt from the searches inside the villa. His stomach growled from eating nothing all night as he subsided on Gatorade and water. Tig sat in a lawn chair anticipating the evacuation, which couldn't come soon enough. As he stared toward Zombieland, Tig heard a disturbing thunk from somewhere to the south, followed by an equally unnerving mortars. No way, he thought. 17 Feb must have locked down the city by now, right? Mortars are classic siege weapons, typically projectile shells dropped into a hollow metal tube and launched in high arcs to land on remote targets. Tig had heard them many times in his military career. Others would say the first explosion of the third Annex firefight sounded like an RPG, but Tig felt certain it was a mortar. When it hit, he looked to the west and saw a flash of light silhouette the men atop Building C. Then he saw their fusillade of rounds hammer into Zombieland from the rooftop. As he prepared to join them, Tig heard a deeper and more ominous sound, something like "foom." Mortars were falling, and when the second explosion hit the top of the wall, Tig got the distinct impression that his tower would be underneath the next one. He knew that DB could cover the area of sheep pens and dirt paths from atop Building B, And rather than stay on his tower and risk getting slammed, Tig held tight to his rifle, grabbed Oz's go bag, and jumped down. He moved in a low crouch toward the workout area in the direction of Building C. When the third explosion hit, directly atop the rooftop, Tig looked up and for an instant saw a blinding flash. Then the entire roof disappeared in a shroud of black smoke. In quick succession, the fourth explosion rocked the roof, and then the fifth. Rocky debris rained down on Tig and bounced like hailstones on the tin roof covering the prison gym. His thoughts sped to the men who he was trying to reach. Oh, shit. The shooting from Building C had stopped as soon as first of the three mortars landed on the roof. He knew that the men up there were hurt or worse. If there was one tiny bit of good news, the shooting also seemed to have stopped from their enemies in Zombieland. As he ran toward the rear of the building to reach the ladder, Tig called on his radio. Hey, guys on Building C, you guys okay? You guys okay? Yeah, came the team leader's reply from inside the building. We're fine in here, we're good. Not you, Tig shouted. The guys on top of the frickin' roof. The TL didn't respond, and neither did anyone on the roof. After a pause, Tig heard Jack's voice fill the silence in the radio. I see no movement. Atop Building D, Jack had been watching the neighboring roof intermittently since the first explosion. When the third, fourth, and fifth explosions hit Building C, he saw black plumes of smoke rise from where Roan and Oz had been firing into Zombieland only seconds earlier. Jack couldn't see the fallen men who had dropped below the parapet and were blanketed in smoke. But in the quiet that followed, Jack thought he heard someone groaning in pain. Even that was more promising news than he'd feared. Jack considered it doubtful that anyone on Building C could survive a single direct mortar hit to their location, much less three. His heart had clenched when he saw the last two explosions. As Tig climbed the ladder to the roof, Jack continued to scan for signs of life, even as he remained on guard for enemy action to the north or west. While Jack waited for word, he stewed over how accurate the mortars were. 3 direct hits on a relatively small rooftop were as remarkable as they were lethal. They had to have somebody spotting them, he thought. Somebody was around, probably at an elevated position looking down at us. They hit the wall, and then they corrected, and those last 3 were right on target. It also occurred to Jack that the attackers had targeted the single most important and most crowded building inside the walls. Building C housed the sensitive compartmental information facility, the operator's team room, which logically made it the command post, and therefore the most likely place for Americans to have taken refuge. To be that accurate, Jack thought, that precise with these mortars, they had to have been very proficient. They had to have known the exact location of that building. Maybe their enemies had done it by dead reckoning, a product of trial and error with help from a concealed spotter. Another possibility was the attackers had used latitude and longitude coordinates to provide by a GPS device. Perhaps in a car that drove up to the front gate, or on the smartphone of someone walking outside the annex. It had occurred to DB that the man he'd seen walking outside the annex might have employed a more primitive approach to target locating, estimating distance by pacing them off on foot. The more Jack thought about it, the more he felt consumed by dread. Now that the enemy had dialed in on a position of the annex buildings, they might fire 20 or 30 mortars inside the walls. Every rooftop and walkway was vulnerable. Worse, Jack anticipated that the mortars were the only first wave of a full-on assault. As Jack envisioned it, first the attackers would soften up the American defenders by raining mortars on our positions. Then they'd move in on the ground with RPGs and heavy machine guns. Jack knew that he and his fellow operators would put up a ferocious fight, but eventually the annex walls would give way. The outnumbered, outgunned defenders could hold out only for so long against an overwhelming force. Considering what had already happened and the various ways the annex might be overrun, Jack concluded that he'd reached the low point of not only the long night, but of his entire life. He were dead or dying, adding to the death toll of Christopher Stevens and Sean Smith. Having somehow missed the radio call in which the TL said that everyone inside Building C was safe, Jack suspected that the mortars had penetrated the roof and killed more or all of them too. It seemed only a matter of time before he and every other American in Benghazi were dead. He didn't want to imagine what the radicals might do to our bodies. Jack's thoughts returned to the mortars. He thought about how powerless the annex fighters were against bombs dropping from above. You don't know if it's coming, he thought. It's like you can defend against it, but you're out in the open. You can't shoot back towards it. It's basically a lottery. If it's your time, it's your time. And death can come right out of the sky and kill you in an instant. He heard TL call on the radio for everyone in fighting position to check in by order of location. From Building A, Tonto called Roger, all okay. DB reported that he was safe on Building B. Everyone waited to hear a voice from Building C, but none came. Building C, check in. Still nothing. Building C. The silence confirmed in Jack's mind that his worst fears had been realized for Roan and Oz and Dave Ubben. It was hard to imagine that he could have felt worse, but that would have been the case if Jack had known that a fourth man on the roof, his friend, Glenn Bub Doherty, was there as well. Finally, Jack filled the empty radio space. Building D, Roger, he said in a melancholy voice. I'm okay. Like Jack, DB felt as though it was only a matter of time before more mortars hit them. He knew that he needed to cover the area east of the wall, but he also considered abandoning his post if he heard the thumps and whistles of incoming mortars. He told himself, that's actually pretty stupid. Usually the mortar round that hits you is the one you don't hear. After the third mortar hit the roof, Tonto heard the squeal of tires from the area south of the annex around the dirt racetrack. When no mortars launched, he believed that some members of the 10-car motorcade had in fact gone in pursuit of the attackers and chased them off. At the same time, he wondered when he and the other Benghazi operators would get relief from the Tripoli team, all of whom except Glenn remained inside Building C. He called the DB on the next rooftop. Where the heck are the guys from Tripoli? Tonto returned his focus to a possible ground assault. I need to get ready, he told himself. He stared into the unfinished four-story building across the road to the south. Tonto told DB he continued to hear voices in the field near the building, whispering and mumbling from among the weeds. DB tossed him a pair of binoculars across the narrow gap between the roofs. He helped Tonto scour the buildings and the grounds nearby. Between sweeps across this sector, Tonto called the TL to say that the 10-car motorcade escort had left. Doesn't look like they're coming back, Tonto said. We're going to need another way out of here. Between sweeps across this sector, Tonto called the TL. We're going to need another way out of here. As Tonto remained on watch, He felt as though he'd been prepared for everything that had already happened, and everything yet to come. You don't have time to feel sorry for yourself, he thought. You don't feel sorry for anybody else. You can feel sorry once you're safe and you're sitting back drinking a beer and you can howl at the moon. When everything's done, that's when you can feel sorry. With each rung, he climbed on the building C ladder. Tig swiveled his head toward Zombieland, watching for muzzle flashes to see if anyone was about to shoot him in the back. The attackers had stopped shooting after the third mortar struck the roof. But neither Tig nor any of the other Americans knew would resume shooting. Whether they'd resume launching more mortars or attempt to breach the walls and invade the annex. We expected nothing less. Tig leapt over the parapet and ducked low as he looked around the blackened roof. The sun still hung low below the horizon. The smoke swirled, giving Tig only a few feet of visibility. "I need help up here," he called on the radio. The first man Tig spotted was Dave Ubben, propped up against the parapet, 10 feet from the northeast corner, conscious but dazed, his pistol in his right hand. Tig knelt down next to Ubben and grabbed the firearm, worried that while his shock and pain, the DS agent might mistake Tig for someone who needed to be shot. He tossed the pistol to the side and pulled out a headlamp from my medical bag. Tig flipped down the red lens cover to keep from painting the target for the attackers. Tig saw that Ubben had suffered major injuries to his lower left leg and serious wounds to his left arm below the elbow. Tig pulled out both tourniquets from my medical kit. Just as Roan had demonstrated days earlier during the medical refresher course, Tig applied the first tourniquet to Ubben's badly damaged leg. As he worked in the darkness, Tig accidentally raked his hand across the edge of one of Ubben's protruding bones. The razor-sharp bone sliced through Tig's skin, but he'd worried about it later. He moved to Ubben's arm, tightening the second tourniquet just below the armpit. As he worked, Tig offered a steady stream of reassurances. "Hang in there, dude. You're going to be okay. We're going to get you down. You're going to be all right. We'll get you out of here." Tig reached back into his days as a Marine and pulled out a motivational nickname for the toughest among them. "Hang in, Devil Dog," Ubben could only mumble in reply. When both tourniquets were in place, Tig began to move away from the DS agent to see who else needed help. Ubben roused himself, said, "Hey man, I need my pistol." "Roger that," Tig said. He reached to pick up the gun and put his back turned to Ubben. He quickly cleared the mag, unloading it so the wounded man couldn't accidentally shoot him or any of the others who might come up the ladder to help. After returning Ubben's gun, Tig ducked behind the parapet and looked around. Off to his left, Tig saw someone lying motionless, face down in the center of the roof. The man looked to be beyond help, and Tig wanted to prioritize men who might benefit most. "Anybody need help?" he called. Tig heard moaning from the northwest corner. As he hustled that way, Tig paused past a hole in the concrete bigger than his fist from where a mortar hit. As he darted towards the moans, he saw the shapes of two men, one moving, one still, next to each other in the northwest corner. His frustration rising, Tig called again on his radio. "Hey, I've got 4 guys down. I need help up here. Right now." He began to suspect that no one wanted to leave the relative safety of the building C in case the mortars and gunfire resumed. DB answered from atop building B, his voice filled with rage. "I need to know if somebody's going up to building C, because otherwise I'll get down and go over there myself." He couldn't imagine why members of the Tripoli team had immediately ran to Building C's ladder to help. Tonto knew that DB had the best field of fire. To protect the annex, so he told DB to stay on Building B, and he'd go instead. But before Tonto could move, someone from inside Building C told everyone to remain at their post. We got it, we're coming up. To Tig, the wait for help felt like an eternity. Through a well of pain, I heard Tig make calls for more help. Still not fully comprehending that I was one of the 4 men down, I thought about the man lying next to him. Shit, I need to get help to Roan. I need to help Roan. When he reached myself seconds later, Tig forced him to focus on his own injuries. Hey man, Oz told Tig, look at this. Using my right hand, I'd lifted my lifeless left hand up into its proper place. Then I'd watch it as I let go and it flopped back down at an odd angle. I think I broke it. Dude, Tig said, stop doing that. You're going to mess it up even more. Tig grabbed the assault rifle from Oz's lap and set it aside. He picked up the one-piece combat tourniquet that I hadn't been able to apply, pulled the band around my upper arm, and twisted it tight to stop the bleeding. Tig knew that I needed a lot more care inside Building C and eventually a hospital. He helped me to my feet and asked if I could walk to the ladder. I looked at him and said, I think I can. As I took tentative steps forward, I'll make do. As I shuffled away, Tig dropped to his knees and rolled Roan onto his back on a wet rooftop. He ripped off Roan's Rhodesian vest and his other gear, then raised his shirt to look over his bare torso front and back, check for signs of life and bleeding. The only injuries Tig noticed were small shrapnel marks on Roan's forehead. Finding no open wounds needing immediate care, Tig pressed his fingers to Roan's thick neck to search for a pulse on the carotid artery. Roan's throat twitched momentarily, but Tig could find no pulse. He flipped up the red lens on his headlamp and shone the white light in Roan's eyes. Roan's eyes didn't react. Tig pressed his ear against Roan's chest, but he heard nothing. He put his ear to Roan's mouth and could feel no breath. Tig worked in silence. The attackers who'd been firing from Zombieland apparently had pulled back. The mortars had stopped. Tig knew that they could change at any moment, but at the present, the only sounds he heard were trickles of water flowing from shrapnel holes in the nearby tank. It pained him, but Tig knew that there was nothing he could do for Roan. He left his friend and ran to the man laying face down in the middle of the roof. Tig had never met Glenn, and he didn't know that one of the Tripoli operators had climbed up on the rooftop. He thought the prone man with the scruffy beard was Jack. What in the hell is he doing up here, Tig thought. Then Tig remembered that he'd heard Jack's voice on the radio, saying that there was no movement atop Building C. Tig rolled the man onto his back and realized that the fourth person that needed help was one of the Tripoli operators. Glenn's assault rifle was still strapped around him, so Tig pulled it off and threw it to one side. He went through the same steps as he'd taken with Roan, with the same results. Again, he found no signs of major trauma, only a laceration of the left side of the abdomen. Like Roan, Glenn was unresponsive with no pulse, no breath or heart sounds, and no eye movement under white light. By then, Tig had company on the roof. Joining him were the Benghazi team leader, a Tripoli operator who was a medic, and 2 Delta Force members, known to the operators as D-Boys. One D-Boy had helped me as I walked toward the ladder. He asked me, can you get down on your own? Yeah, I guess I have to, I answered. Well, the D-boy helped me step up on the box near the ladder, and I knew that I'd lost a lot of blood, so as I hooked my right arm firmly over the top rung of the ladder as a precaution, I then swung my right leg over the ledge. Better to be careful, I told myself. You survived all this, and now you don't want to break your neck getting down. But just as I feared, my feet slipped from under me, and my body slammed against the ladder. Caught my full weight with my right arm, pulled myself back, and regained his footing to climb down. At the bottom, I went around the building's north corner and past the mossy pool. See, I got a good somebody helping. You can take that with you, honey.
Yeah, it's okay.
I ran into one of the operators from Tripoli, a medic who guided me the rest of the way into Building C. Up on the roof, the D-boy struggled to get Big Dave Ubin down the ladder without adding to his injuries. Ultimately, one of the boys used a 1-inch nylon strap to bind Ubin to his back. He then carried the 250-pound DS agent down the ladder that way. Meanwhile, Tig moved from one rooftop fighting position to the next, collecting weapons and stacking them against the parapet. When he reached Roan's body, Tig looked around unsuccessfully for the missing machine gun, then grabbed Roan's pistol. Before he moved on, Tig stopped to say an impromptu prayer. He placed his hand on Roan's chest and whispered, "God watch over him. Guide him to where he needs to be. Take care of his family." He went over to Glenn, pressed his hand on Glenn's chest, and said the same prayer. Then he collected Glenn's weapons as well. A case officer inside Building C came on the radio asking for Roan to come down and help treat Oz's wounds. "Roan, we need you at the CP," he said, using shorthand for the command post. No one replied, so he repeated the call. "Roan, we need you in the CP." "Hey," Tig said, "Roan's gone. He's not with us anymore." Weary and downhearted, but also livid about all that had gone wrong since the start of this ordeal, Tig dragged the bodies of the two former SEALs closer to the ladder to make it easier to bring them down when it was time to leave. Tig scooped up the pile of weapons, climbed down the ladder, and jogged around the front of Building C. He went inside, dumped the weapons on a couch, looked over where several people worked on Oz. With a little help from the medic, blood-drenched, I had somehow walked into Building C under my own power. The medic applied a dressing to my neck wound and laid me down on the couch. My condition was serious but not immediately life-threatening, so the medic went back to the roof to see if anyone was worse off. A clutch of case officers and other annex staffers stood over top of me, none with much medical training. And that's when one called for Roan to only have Tig snap back that Roan was gone. I realized that I'd have to oversee my own care. I'd been hit. Now I'm bleeding, I told them. "Somebody get some shears and cut off my clothes. You need to get me naked and check for bleeds, front and back." The female case officer that I'd escorted to dinner 10 long hours earlier ran to the medical area, but she couldn't find shears. When I heard her asking for help finding them, somehow I remembered their exact location. On the third shelf from the first set of storage racks, I called out to her. The annex deputy had already pulled out a big folding combat knife and started to slice off my clothes. "Be careful with that," I joked. "I don't want to get stabbed also." A third shelf from the first set of storage racks. When Tig saw that I was in good hands, he hurried to the rear of the building. He struggled to raise a steel safety shutter that would allow him to open the back door, enabling the D-boys to bring Ubin in without carrying him around to the front. But the mortars had damaged the shutter, making it a chore to lift. By the time Tig opened the back door, Ubin was already inside.
That I was in good hands. He hurried to
Being treated for major wounds to his left, to his leg and arm. The Tripoli medic has also started intravenous fluids for both Ubin and myself.
But the mortars had damaged the
Tig still had my go bag, so he went to the medical area to replace the supplies he'd used. The enormity of everything that had happened gripped Tig, and he tore open cabinets and riffled through supplies. When an annex staffer asked what the hell he was doing, Tig was tempted to raise his fist. Instead, he snapped, "I'm looking for tourniquets in case we get more mortars." He stormed back outside, intending to return to his tower position. On the way, one of the D-boys told Tig he couldn't go back there because it was too dangerous. I've been there all night by myself, Tig said. The Tripoli-based team leader for all GSR operators in Libya stepped in before it turned physical. He told Tig to stay near Building C so everyone could see each other's location.
On the way, one of the D-boys
Still boiling, Tig followed the order. I'm standing here watching a wall, he thought. I couldn't see anything. Can't do nothing. Can't react if something happens. Great plan, TL. They've been there. They've been here 5 minutes, and they're telling us what to do. As he stood in an area he considered a no man's land to the east of Building C, Tig heard over the radio that a 50-vehicle convoy with technicals is on its way to the annex to guard the evacuation and escort them to the airport. Well, that was quite an upgrade from the lightly armed Tig-car motorcade that bugged out when the mortars hit. As he stood in an area he considered a no man's land to the east of Building C, Tig heard over the radio that a 50-vehicle convoy. As he stood in an area he considered, Jack heard the radio transmission too, and he believed that all the remaining Benghazi operators were thinking the same thing. I hope they're going to escort us to the airport and not attack us. We don't know who's friendly, who's bad. There are militias out there. They all look the same. And some of them are trying to kill us. Jack heard the radio transmission too. If they had no choice, they'd fight a 50-vehicle convoy of technicals with 100 or more heavily armed men. But if it came to that, Jack felt certain that the annex would be remembered as the 21st century Alamo that no American survivors. Some of them are trying to kill us. Someone drove a white flatbed truck with wooden side rails to the front of Building C to transport the bodies of Roan and Glenn. By coincidence, Roan had used the same white truck weeks earlier on the day when he and another operator had collected supplies from the airport and faced off with a group of hostile militiamen. Tig moved toward Building C ladder to help bring the wooden down the fallen. Transport the bodies of Roan and Glenn. By coincidence, he told the D-boys that he knew where to find a heavy strap so they could help them lower the bodies from the roof. They weren't interested, or they didn't want to take the time. We got this, one told him. Don't worry about it. Tig watched as they climbed the ladder to the roof and lifted Roan's body onto the parapet. Tig knew what would happen next, so he turned away to avoid seeing it. Afterward, Tig couldn't shake the sickening sound of Roan's body hitting the marble patio at the bottom of the 15-foot wall. Fall. Jack watched from atop Building D. He'd missed some of the radio calls, so he still didn't know all that had happened. He saw a D-boy lift a limp body. Jack knew that it was Roan. He recognized Roan's khaki cargo pants and his button-down orange plaid shirt. Jack watched it from the King Leonidas beard, removed any doubt and extinguished any hope. He turned away. After Roan, the D-boys took the same approach with Glenn. His body hit a bush on the way down, slicing open his abdomen. Disgusted and angry, Tig told himself that both men deserved better. No one was shooting at them. The mortars had stopped, and a huge friendly convoy was supposedly en route. The most Tig could do for Roan now was to grab his cold hands, while the D-boy took Roan's feet. Together, they carried him to the side of Building C. Two others from the Tripoli team carried Glenn. No one was shooting at them. The mortars had stopped. Well, that's the end of chapter 12. We are getting on to chapter 13 now. The convoy.
Cold hands. While the D-boy took Rome's feet.
And I do think I have enough
carried him to the side.
wine in this bottle to probably get through the next chapter. So
From the Tripoli team carried Glenn. No one was shooting at them. The mortars had stopped. Now we are getting on to chapter 13 now.
with each passing minute, the sun edged closer to the horizon, bathing the annex in a dim
And
light.
I do think I have enough.
With the huge convoy en route, Benghazi GRS team leader called for all remaining rooftop defenders to climb down and collect any last personal items. The TL stood outside Building C when he made the call. Looking down from the Building D, Jack caught his eye. The TL nodded, his face etched with sadness. Jack knew that Roan was gone, but he still didn't know about Glenn. Jack climbed down and ran into his room and rushed to fill a duffel bag with his laptop, cell phone, and everything else he thought he might contain personal information. He grabbed the mesh bag with his driver's license and credit cards, but in his haste, exhausted and grieving, Jack overlooked the little box with his wedding ring.
Jack climbed down and ran.
It would remain behind in Benghazi, with so much else to digest.
He grabbed the mesh bag.
He went to the team room in Building C and filled the remaining space of his duffel bag, or his duffel with weapons, radios, and other sensitive equipment.
Overlooked the little box.
Jack walked outside and saw the flatbed truck.
It would remain behind.
Roan's body was there on the ground, so Jack and one of the D-boys lifted it and laid it on the steel bed as gently as they could.
He went to the team room.
Then Jack saw the second body.
And filled the
His eyes moved from lacerated abdomen to the unmistakable face. Glenn.
Jack walked outside and saw the
Jack fought back to keep his knees from buckling.
Roan's body was there on the ground.
Two men he considered brothers had just been killed on a rooftop, 100 feet from where he stood. Now he was loading their bodies onto the back of a flatbed truck. It pained him more than he could describe. He hadn't even had a chance to greet Glenn.
Two men he considered brothers.
As the Americans prepared to leave Building C for a final time, the white marble of the living room floor was coated red with blood from Oz and Dave Ubin. The door to Building C opened and staffers carried out stretchers, bearing myself, who remained alert, and Ubin, who was unconscious. I was
Americans prepared to leave Building
only
C
in my underwear,
but
but rather than ask for clothes, I called for someone to fetch three things I needed to leave Benghazi behind before: my wallet, my phone, and my passport.
bearing myself.
Jack and several others lifted Dave Ubin's stretcher onto the back of the white pickup, a white hatchback. Even as the stretcher pushed all the way in, Dave Ubin's feet hung out the back. The Tripoli medic jumped in the back to care for the injured man during the ride. Before the stretcher bearers loaded him onto the hatchback, I looked up and searched for Jack. Roan shouldered me, I told him. He saved my life.
The stretcher pushed all the way in, Dave Ubin's feet.
At about 6 a.m., the Benghazi GRS team leader called Tonto on the radio. There's another militia coming in, and it's a big one. About 50 vehicles, and they're technicals. They're heavy. ID them to make sure they're the good guys.
Roan shouldered me, I told him. He saved my life. The stretcher pushed all the way in, Dave Ubin's feet.
At about 6 a.m., the Benghazi GRS team leader called Tonto on the radio. There's another militia coming in, and it's a big one. Standing atop Building A and overlooking the front gate, Tonto thought about the command for a few seconds. If they aren't, he answered, how the heck am I supposed to stop them?
At about 6 a.m., the Benghazi GRS team leader called Tonto on the radio. There's another militia coming in, and it's a big one.
Standing
In the front gate. Tonto thought about the command for a few seconds.
Sorry about that, guys. I didn't have something plugged in all the way.
How the heck am I
A short
supposed to
time
stop
later, the promised convoy rumbled down Annex Road. A nearly quarter-mile procession of dirty white Toyota pickups with mounted discs of heavy machine guns, filled with hard-looking soldiers in hues of gray, brown, and tan camouflage. They bristled with RPGs, AK-47s, and other weapons. Neither Tonto or any of the other operators knew which militia this was, or whether they were in official Libyan government force. But that wasn't the Americans' main concern. As long as these soldiers or militiamen were friendly and willing to escort us to the airport, we didn't have any complaints, except for one. As Tig told himself, if these guys are friendly, why the heck didn't they get called in to help us in the beginning? A moment of truth came, and Tonto lowered his weapon. He welcomed the convoy commander in the lead vehicle with the universal hang loose sign, curling the three middle fingers in his left hand and shaking his thumb and pinky. The Libyan militia commander smiled and returned the surfer greeting. Tonto called the TL on the radio. Yep, these are the guys. Commander smiled. Tonto called the TL on the radio. Yep, these are the guys. Commander smiled. As everyone inside the annex gathered personal belongings, Tonto caught the commander's attention and made another hand gesture. What's that? He turned his hand into a finger gun, flipped it upside down, and then pointed toward the field across the road. Among American soldiers, the motion signaled an enemy location. The commander understood. He called up a technical with a mounted Dishka and told his gunner to cover the field. Then he sent a four-man fire team to search for potential enemies. In short order, they pulled out two men who'd been hiding in the brush. Tonto watched with satisfaction as one of the friendly militiamen tightened flex cuffs around the man's wrists and marched him to one of the trucks. Tonto didn't know how long the men had been hiding there, but also didn't know if they were mortar spotters or reconnaissance team, or otherwise linked to a hostile militia. But at least Tonto hadn't been imagining voices coming from the field all night. He never learned what became of the men. Sunrise on September 12, 2012 arrived at 6:22 a.m. in Benghazi. Just as the surviving Americans had made final preparations to leave the annex, a half dozen annex cars lined up to drive out the front gate to join the big convoy, along with the hatchback bearing Oz and Dave Ubin. Tig got behind the wheel of the flatbed bearing the bodies of Ronan Glenn. Jack rode shotgun. Sean Smith's body remained in the Mercedes for the ride to the airport. As everyone waited for the signal to move out, Jack watched an argument erupt between Bob and Annex Chief. Bob, the Annex Chief, and the Benghazi GRS team leader. Bob told the TL that he wanted to remain behind, to gather information and intelligence from locals about what happened and who was to blame. The TL objected, but Bob held firm, smoking a cigarette outside Building C. You are relieved, the TL told Bob. Get in the frickin' vehicle. Bob snuffed out his cigarette and complied. But he wasn't done arguing. When the Americans drove through the gate, they filtered in among their armed escorts, who made sure that the pickups were mounted machine guns covered each vehicle from the annex on all sides. Several technicals drove out front as a motorized wedge to block off intersections so the Americans could roll through without stopping. Tonto felt concerned that they might be vulnerable to attack moving through the airport in daylight. But then he decided that they were part of the biggest, baddest thing in town. Nobody in his right mind would mess with him. As Tig steered the flatbed through the gate, Jack saw the gardener, whom he watched smoking and praying outside his shack during the firefight. The gardener turned himself into a one-man honor guard, waving goodbye to his American employers. Jack looked through the back window of the truck cab to make sure the sheet-wrapped bodies remained secure. He noticed a perfectly shaped bullet hole through the glass and pointed it out to Tig. Then they returned to silence, to their own thoughts. Jack thought about Roan's wife, Dorothy, and the infant son who'd never know his father. He felt pangs of sadness as he recalled that Roan had told him Benghazi would be his final job as an operator, and how much Roan looked forward to getting home to be with his family for good. Jack winced as he remembered that Roan had extended his trip twice. One painful thought followed another. He felt crushed by the memories of the trip out west to visit Jack and his family. She doesn't even know he's dead yet, he thought. And she won't know about that trip because it's never going to happen now. Jack wished that someone else had met him at the airport 5 weeks earlier. That someone else had slipped a loaded pistol into his hand as a welcome gift. And that someone else had shown him the lay of the land so he'd do good work and stay safe in Benghazi. But Jack also knew that Roan never shied away from protecting others or from doing what he thought was right. Jack also wished that Glenn had never come from Tripoli to help them and had never climbed the ladder to see Roan. But he knew that Glenn wouldn't have wanted anyone to have taken his seat on the plane to Benghazi. He knew that connecting with friends defined Glenn's life. And Jack knew that Glenn's actions fit the warrior code that they all lived by. If his fellow operators were facing danger on rooftops, Glenn would be there as well. Sitting in the passenger seat of the flatbed cab, twisting his head backward to watch over the bodies, Jack felt devastated. His only solace was knowing that Roan and Glenn had died as heroes. When the convoy reached the airport, a militia guard team stationed there prevented him from briefly entering. But soon the convoy rolled through the gate to the non-commercial side of the tarmac and parked near a small jet the Tripoli team had chartered. Several Tripoli operators carried Dave Ubben toward the stairs of the plane. The operators had lashed him to the stretcher so they could turn it sideways to get the body of the badly wounded DS agent through the entrance. Ubben veered in and out of consciousness. His fellow operator began to lift my stretcher, but I stopped him and said, "Hell no." I said, "I walked into this country and I'm going to frickin' walk out of it out of this town." I scooted to the edge of the hatchback and raised myself upright, pushing through the pain. I steadied myself. Step by difficult step, I approached the plane with blood dripping down from my left arm, despite the tourniquet. When the plane's uniformed flight attendants saw me coming, they went wide-eyed and ran to spread towels down the carpeted aisle across a couch near the plane's tail. I climbed the stairs and then lay down on the couch. The stretcher bearers placed Dave on the floor beside me. The Tripoli medic began to sat between the injured men for the flight. Other Americans boarded while their baggage filled the cargo hold. As the loading continued, the militia that apparently controlled the airport challenged the presence of the much larger military convoy that escorted the Americans. Jack watched as dozens of combat-ready men screamed at each other on the tarmac. This is going to be a complete massacre, Jack thought. If somebody starts shooting, there's no cover. Everyone is just standing around. He held tight to his assault rifle as the argument raged. Jack said an operator's silent prayer. "Please, nobody shoot." Tonto watched the showdown and predicted the future. The militia that runs the airport has like 2 cars here. Our militia has 50 cars. There's no diplomatic solution here. Whoever has the biggest guns or the most guns is going to win. When tension seemed highest, a militiaman inadvertently fired his AK into the ground near his feet. The operators braced for action, suspecting that the accidental discharge would trigger jumping militiamen to start shooting. Instead, it seemed to diffuse the situation, as though a single careless shot reminded everybody how easily they all could be killed. As the Americans filed into the plane, Bob, the annex chief, again objected to leaving. He was in Benghazi as an intelligence officer, yet he was being told to evacuate with an endless list of unanswered questions about what had just happened. Bob began a new shouting match, this time with the country GRS team leader from Tripoli. The Tripoli TL exercised his authority as the ranking American security official in Libya. "You're relieved of your duty," he yelled. "You will get on the plane or I will put you on that plane." Finally, Bob complied. The plane overflowed with Americans eager to take off. The men and women on board began to suspect that they were snake bitten with bad luck. A second accidental discharge cracked loudly, this time somewhere aboard the jet. A further delay followed as the crew and operators tried to determine whether the bullet had pierced the hull of the pressurized aircraft, making it unsafe to fly. Holy shit, I thought. Are we ever going to get out of here? The shock had worn off, and so had the morphine I'd been given. As I lay on the couch withering in the worst pain I'd ever experienced, I tried to make jokes to distract myself and ease the mood. But then my arm would cause me a jolt of agony, and I'd unleash a torrent of curses before fighting to regain the sense of humor. As the delay stretched on, my main concern became Ubin. I'm going to get up with my pistol and friggin' tell the captain he's flying flying one way or the other, I thought. We got to get Dave to a hospital or he's going to die. Finally, someone discovered that the bullet had burrowed harmlessly into the metal frame of a seat. So at about 7:30 a.m., a plane load of survivors from the attack on the Special Mission Compound and the CIA Annex took flight. Left behind were Jack, Tonto, DB, Tig, DS agent Alec Henderson, and two D-boys. Two of the Tripoli operators, the Tripoli-based linguist, and the country GRS team lead, along with the bodies of Glenn, Roan, and Sean Smith. Members of the militia escort understood that the Americans would be abandoning their vehicle, so several asked for the keys. One matter with pleading eyes approached Tonto for keys to the four-door BMW, a twin of the sedan which Tiggs go bag that they'd left at the corner of Gunfighter Road. "Vehicle, sir," he asked. "Vehicle?" When the operators felt certain another plane would be coming, they emptied the vehicles of their ammunition, maps, medical kits, and other tools. Tig realized that when the State Department team left the first plane, they failed to remove Sean Smith's body from the Mercedes SUV. He got the keys and with help, moved Sean's body to the flatbed alongside Roan and Glenn. Tonto handed the keys from the Americans' other vehicles to the militia leader. The operators watched as the commander distributed them among his men, who flushed like teenagers with their first cars. The screech of tires as the militiamen peeled out of the airport ended the operator's murky friend or foe relationship with the Benghazi militias. Several Benghazians who'd served as local liaisons for the annex had somehow heard about what happened and came to see the Americans off. One Libyan, whom several of the operators liked, burst into tears as he apologized. "This should have never happened," he said. "I'm really sorry." "It's not your fault," Tonto told him. "You didn't do anything. Just take care of this." "We will," the man told him. "We will make sure people pay for this." "You've got to, or else this will keep happening," Tonto said. "You got to fix this, or else you won't see us here anymore. And if you do, it won't be friendlies. It won't be as friendlies." Another Libyan in tears was the man who'd gone to the hospital to identify Chris Stevens. He understood that there would be no American coroner at his school. The dream of a friendly accessible space where average Benghazians could learn about the United States, had died along with the ambassador. An hour after the first plane left, the operators got word that members of the force that escorted them to the airport had gone to Benghazi Medical Center to retrieve Stephen's body. When the recovery team returned, Henderson peeled off back the sheet to officially identify the remains. Stevens was barefoot but fully clothed, with no signs of injury or abuse, his eyes shut in peaceful repose. The operators placed the ambassador's body on the flatbed with the others. The Libyan Air Force agreed to send a hulking C-130 cargo plane to take the remaining men and bodies to Tripoli. While they waited for it to arrive, the exhausted operators stretched out on the tarmac to get some rest, keeping their loaded guns close at hand back home to say they were safe. Jack didn't know what, if anything, his wife had heard on the news, so he wanted to reassure her. She was not yet 3 months pregnant. Jack worried that she might miscarry if she feared that he'd been killed. Jack made sure she was calm, and then he told her, "Whatever you see on the news, just know that it's over. I'm okay. I'll see you soon." Jack told his wife that Roan was with him in Benghazi, so she asked if he was okay too. Emotions welling up for the past few hours overwhelmed Jack. He began to cry. He survived, so there was the yang. The loss of his friend was the yen. He didn't make it. "What do you mean he didn't make it?" she asked, her voice raising. Jack could barely choke out the answer. "I'll tell you when I get back," he said finally. "But don't talk about it with anyone, because next of kin hasn't been notified. I'll call you soon. I love you." Hours of waiting for the plane gave Tonto time to reflect on his fellow operators. If it had been any other 6 guys, I don't think any of us would have made it. We lost Roan, we lost Bub, and Oz got hurt. But it could have been worse. We all could have been gone. It was like we were meant to be here together. None of these guys had a panic bone in their body. It bothered Tonto that they'd be flying out on the Libyan C-130 instead of a U.S. military plane. The more he thought about it, the more convinced Tonto became. If we were given what we asked from the beginning, air support, you name it, we would have not have lost Roan and Bub. And if they let us leave the annex at the beginning, the ambassador and Sean would be alive. More than 2 hours after the Americans arrived at the airport, the Libyan Air Force plane landed and dropped its cargo ramp. The operators drove the flatbed to the C-130's tail and carried aboard the bodies. 2 on medical litters and 2 on canvas stretchers. One of Glenn's arms struck out particularly perpendicular to his body, fixed there by rigor. Tonto forced down the arm and made sure Glenn was covered. When all were aboard, the Libyan crews raised the tail ramp and taxied for the takeoff. It was about 10:30 a.m., some 13 hours after the attack began at the compound. They flew in silence to Tripoli, some dozing, some reflecting, all spent. When the C-130 landed, embassy staffers met the last Benghazi evacuees at the airport, greeting them with hugs and tears. One of the D-boys brought body bags up the cargo ramp, so Jack did the last thing he could for his fallen friend. He and the D-boy unfolded the white plastic bags and spread them on the floor of the plane. They lifted Ronan, then Glenn, and placed each inside a bag. Jack zippered them up and said his final goodbye. Well, that is the last chapter. We have the epilogue left. I think let's finish it. It's only a few pages. If you guys are up for sticking around, I hope you are. But let's go ahead and finish it, and then we'll get to the Q&A. don't think there's enough to be left for next Wednesday. When the Libyan C-130 took flight bearing the last operators and the 4 bodies of the Battle of Benghazi ended as combat engagement between Americans and their enemies. But that was only the beginning. Even before the survivors returned home, controversies exploded over how officials in Washington behaved prior to, during, and after the attack. The acrimony can be divided generally along 3 fronts. Prior to the attack, who, if anyone, deserves blame and potential punishment for security flaws at the compound? And did those flaws contribute to the deaths of Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith? 4 State Department employees were paid, but all were reinstated and given new jobs at state. 2 later retired voluntarily. During the attack, was the U.S. military response appropriate? And if not, why not? A related question is whether more aggressive U.S. military action was possible. And if so, might it have prevented the deaths of Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty, also known as Ronan Bubb, and also the serious injuries of myself and Dave Ubben? After the attack, did the Obama administration mislead the public for political reasons by erroneously linking the attack to protests triggered by clips from an Innocence of Muslims movie? A related question was whether the administration downplayed the possible role by Al-Qaeda. Like much else in Washington, most answers have fallen on one side or the other of a partisan divide. Republicans and conservatives have been the harshest critics of President Obama, then Secretary of State Clinton, and the administration's handling of the Benghazi attacks. Democrats and liberals have been the stoutest defenders of the president, Clinton, and the administration. Media reports have run gamut on who, if anyone, in Washington deserves the blame and punishment, and whether the attacks could have been considered a tragedy, a scandal, or both. However, by early 2014, one conclusion had gained considerable traction across partisan lines. The attacks could have been prevented. That is, if only State Department had taken appropriate steps to improve security at the compound in response to numerous warnings and incidents during months prior. That conclusion featured prominently in a bipartisan report by the Senate Intelligence Committee. The same committee also confronted the controversial issue of a stand-down order, exploring whether the annex team was delayed from responding to the attacks at the compound. Its final report concluded, although some members of the annex security team expressed frustration that they were unable to respond more quickly to the mission compound, the committee found no evidence of intentional delay or obstruction by the chief of base or any other party. In a footnote, the committee revealed that informal notes obtained from the CIA indicated that the security team left the compound without approval from the base chief, Bob. But the committee accepted Bob's testimony, quoting him as saying, "We launched our QRF force as soon as possible down to State Department compound." Nevertheless, the annex security team members stood by their account of being told repeatedly to stand down before deciding on our own to leave. In a memoir of her tenure as Secretary of State, published in June 2014, my favorite person, Hillary Clinton, gave her most detailed account of her actions to date. She denounced what she called misinformation, speculation, and flat-out deceit by the attacks, and wrote that Obama gave the order to do whatever was necessary to support our people in Libya. She wrote, "Losing these fearless public servants in the line of duty was a crushing blow. As secretary, I was one ultimately responsible for my people's safety, and I never felt that responsibility more deeply than I did that day. Addressing the controversy over what triggered the attack and whether the administration misled the public, she maintained that the Innocent of Muslims video had played a role, though to what extent wasn't clear. There were scores of attackers that night, almost certainly with differing motives. And inaccurate to state that every single one of them was influenced by this hateful video. It was equally inaccurate to state that none of them were. Clinton's account was greeted with praise and condemnation in equal measure. As Clinton promoted her new book, a new investigation was being launched by the House Select Committee on the events surrounding the 2012 attack in Benghazi, chaired by former prosecutor Representative Trey Gowdy, a South Carolina Republican. The committee's creation promised to drive questions about Benghazi. 3 days after the attack on the compound, the bodies of Christopher Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty were returned to the United States in a flag-draped caskets. President Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Clinton, and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta were among those present for their repatriation. After a brief stop in Tripoli, the 4 uninjured Benghazi operators flew to Ramstein Air Base, the U.S. Air Base facility in Germany, and then to Washington for debriefing. Jack flew commercial and had surreal experience of sitting across the aisle from someone reading a newspaper account of the Benghazi attacks. As for myself, the return home was delayed by the first of several hospital stays. I eventually faced more than a dozen surgeries and spent time at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center with Dave Ubben, who also underwent numerous surgeries and significant rehabilitation for his injuries. Since returning home, all of us operators have given sworn testimony behind closed doors to the events described in this book. In December 2013, the United States government honored the operators from Benghazi in secret ceremonies. The State Department gave the operators who responded to the combat plaques that hailed the heroism displayed by members of this security team under fire in the face of extreme risks to their personal safety during the deadly attacks against U.S. facilities. The heroic actions of these professionals were selfless, valorous, and representative of the highest standards of bravery and federal service. Hillary Clinton signed the citations. The State Department gave the same men medals bearing the word heroism, adorned with blue and silver medals. The CIA gave all the operators newly created medals of valor the size of coffee saucers. Honors were also bestowed posthumously on Roan and Glenn, whose family had set up a memorial foundation in his name. Its mission is to bring education and recreation to those in need. The foundation's website can be found at glenndohertyfoundation.org. After Benghazi, the contract operators returned to their homes, their families, and their lives, until now remaining silent as we made decisions about our futures. All have retired from government security contracting for work in the private sector. Mark, Oz, and Tig have used their real names in this book. The names of Jack and DB are pseudonyms used to satisfy the hope of preserving their family's privacy and their own. The only other pseudonym is for Henry, the annex translator. Looking ahead, the surviving Benghazi operators know that the events of these 13 hours will color the rest of our lives. We remain in close contact and all wear black aluminum bracelets etched with the names of the fallen operators, along with the location and date of their deaths. Above all, we hope that Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty, to whom this book is collectively dedicated, will be remembered not as victims or political pawns, but as brave Americans who put themselves in harm's way, who believed in their work and their country, and who died serving others. Well, everyone, that was a rough one, but thank you for all of you that are there and standing by. Let's see what questions do we have today? I'm hoping we have a lot. Hey, so first off, our book winners are, and I want to say thank you to these three for getting all your friends and coming in with the most people who joined you in watching this tonight. And that is Weldon Miller. Thank you so much. Tom Zielinski and Tom McNamara. Thank you so much for all your help. And please message us on your Facebook with your mailing address, and we'll get those out to you. So first question comes from Martini. Says, damn, you look like Max Martini. Max, you could only look this good. Lucky you that you got to play me. Hey, Larry Kisner, I've noticed that you have a bracelet on your left wrist that looks similar to the one that Tonto wears, honoring and remembering Tyrone and Glenn. Is that the same bracelet, and where did you get it? Yeah, it is. This has been on my wrist pretty much nonstop since we got them. And it is a bracelet that I don't think has been repeated. It was something that was done strictly for those of us that were there and those other GRS operators who knew Glenn and Ty. Ty and Bub. But if you reach out to us through Shadow Warriors Project or through my website, we have a Shadow Warriors Project bracelet that also honors Ty and Glenn as well. And along with Sean Smith and Ambassador Stevens. Mark Pola. In the movie, it shows you stuffing your ears with cotton before you opened up with the 240. Did that really happen? Yes, it did. It actually, in reality, it happened when I was on the platform with Tig. And Tig came up and shot right beside my ears before I had anything in the first firefight, and about blew out my eardrums. So I had to get something put in there to help out. But that did happen. Tom Zielinski asks, "Is any idea how long the last attack continued on?" I don't know for sure. I know that from my best recollection, from the first RPG to the last mortar, it was about 1 minute and 19 seconds. Weldon Miller is, how is Colorado doing? And thinking about a little vacation up there. Hey, let me tell you, I'll give you a shout out for Colorado. You can't ask for a more beautiful part of the world. Come along the Front Range, you got the mountains that are going up. Pikes Peak, that's 14,000 feet or better. I think we've got over 14,000 foot peaks. And plenty of open land, plenty of public land that you can go visit and see some beautiful area. Paul Kitko. Oz, have either of the Delta operators ever contacted you or anyone on the team since that morning? I can only speak for myself, Paul, as no one from the Delta operators have contacted me. As for the other team members, I don't know for sure. Tammy Hawthorne, did anyone indeed chase off the ones firing the mortars? Tammy, all I can guess is that when that militia left, and I got to see some of the footage of when they left, they took off, and I know they headed in the direction where the mortars most likely came from. And I believe that's one reason why they stopped. What sent them that way? For me, I believe that it was the Lord up above that did, because that seventh man on our team, which is God above, Jesus Christ, did more to help bring us all home than I think anything else. So God bless to that. Debbie, what type is my blood type? It's O positive. Luis Enrique Restrepo. Luis, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your complete name. But how come you guys did not have any recognition, award medals? You guys uphold and defend a U.S. official annex in a war zone. Um, Lewis, as I read in the epilogue, so the CIA did give us a medal of valor, but they gave that to, it kind of was diminished in its presence because it was given to every one of the contractors that was there. Bob and the other two team leads, the country team lead and the our Benghazi team lead, received what they call the Intel Star, I believe, and that is supposed to be on the same equivalence of the Medal of Honor. But I didn't, because and myself, I didn't get anything from the State Department because I didn't go over to the State Department compound. I was only at the annex, so I didn't get anything from them as well. And quite honestly, I care about the medals. In my heart, I know that what happened, I know the truth, and I was able to serve in this country and make sure that I did my job and our team did our job. And we made sure that everybody that we were supposed to protect made it home to see their family. So for me, that's the that's the badge of honor that I have. But thank you, Lewis, for asking that. Samantha White, at the end of the movie, didn't it say that they did receive a medal and recognition in a private ceremony? In my opinion, these guys deserve a hell of a lot more. Again, kind of going along with what I just said to Lewis, Samantha, is, we did receive a Medal of Valor. But again, it was made, the cook and the maintenance guy got the same medal as we did. Do we deserve more? That's up to other people, and I don't care. If they choose to give us something more, great. If they don't, you know what? I don't need it. What I have is my honor, my pride, my integrity, and most of all, I know that out of all that, I have my love of Jesus Christ, and that the people that I, again, was supposed to bring home, they made it home. Samantha also asked, did I ever get mad about the little things that were left out of the movie? For me, no, I didn't. From the very beginning, I had a conversation with Michael Bay. When you write a book and then you sign and you do a deal to make that book into a movie, if it's not a documentary, you sign your life rights. They have the authority to play it however. For me, I didn't care how they depicted me, what they did with that. But I told Michael Bay, as long as you don't do anything that disrespects Ty and Glenn, because if you do, I'm going to beat the living crap out of you. And that was my word to him. But hats off to Michael Bay. I will say this, kudos to him for doing the movie that he did. It was an entertainment piece, but it kept to the spirit of everything that happened. And as it says in the beginning, this is a true story. And it is a true story in its heart and the purpose of why that movie was made. Edward Radeski, does your arm feel okay these days? As much as the injury can allow. Thank you for all of your reading. Semper Fi. Well, Semper Fi to you too, Ed. It's one of those things. It's going to hurt every day. I don't have much feeling in it. I don't have a lot of dexterity because of lack of feeling. And, but you know what? The Lord has kept me around for a purpose, and it's my job to find out what that purpose is. And I think a lot of it is to share with American people what this country is about, what God is about, and why he's, the fact that we've kicked him out of about everything that we do in this world. And then we question why we have bad things. As God's sitting on the sideline saying, Coach, put me in. Bring God back into your life. Bring him back into this country. And we will see a turnaround as we never have. And I do believe that the Lord up above, that Jesus Christ, our Savior, has brought in more people to serve this country in the administration, in our president, than people would like to know or like to accept. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of flack for that, but you know what? God used Paul, who was Saul, who used to chase down and hunt down Christians and kill them and take them to the gallows. The Lord uses some of the most unlikely people to do some of the most magnificent things. So God bless him, everyone, because that's what matters. Steve Verity, thank you for your service as well for your readings each week. I was here for all of them. Was it ever divulged as to why U.S. planes did not at least arrive or for exfil? Steve, thank you so much for being here each and every week. You don't know how much we appreciate that, as well as everyone else. They never did really give us a solid reason why anything didn't happen. I have my own beliefs to it. And I've talked, the community we live in is very small. And I've talked to several people around who were in and around the map. I guess the easiest way to describe that as why, in my opinion, why it happened is, so there was no official U.S. military presence, no DOD presence in Libya. So the senior most organization there is the State Department, who is led by the Secretary of State. She has to ask for help from DOD to allow them to come in. And that is under the rules of the Constitution and how things are set in the rules and history between all agencies. So the best I can figure from that is that she never asked for help. Now, if that was because she didn't want it, she thought she could handle it for whatever it is, who knows? But, and as for justice, it'll be done in this life or the next. But thank you, Steve. Jim Anakovic, what are your feelings right now after finishing the book? Jim, and everybody out there, this, I think I've said this before, this is the first time that I have read the book completely from cover to cover since it's been printed. I read the manuscript, or at least most of the manuscript, to make sure its accuracy that I knew of. But outside of that, this is the first time. And, it was a lot harder than what I thought. It's been 7 years. I've talked a lot about it. I do a lot of public speaking where I've talked about what has happened. Me and Tig talk together. I do things by myself. I talk about overcoming adversity. I talk about my faith. But I didn't think this would be necessarily as hard as it was, but it was. But thank you all for making it easier for me knowing that you're here each and every week. So God bless you all. So my wife, Crystal, says, so many people call you guys heroes, and you are. You are certainly my hero. Do you have a hero? Do you have a hero besides me? Do I have a hero? The Lord up above is my hero. God, I love people as God loves me, and I try to live that every day. Without my wife and her being the foundation that holds me steady, that keeps me in line, I would probably be a freaking mess. But thank you, honey, and God bless you for being by putting up with me, because I know I'm not an easy man to live with. Oliver Sanchez, what is the picture above your left shoulder? The picture above my left shoulder, Oliver, is from when I was on set with Max Martini, and we were just doing some training on weapons handling and entering into the front gate of the compound on the on set. Thank you very much. David Keller asks, what do you think about organizing an effort to construct a Benghazi memorial somewhere in the U.S.? That's something that is near and dear to my heart. It is something that I would love to do. I would love to find and honestly, I would love to find it here in Colorado, a spot to do that, because then I'd know I could take care of it and go to it every day, or at least make sure that it's not going to be defamed. And you know, I've thought about it a lot, and what I'd like to do somewhere is put the monument would be a replica of the rooftop, and with our team on top of it, each one of us in a as a life-size bronze figure. That would be my dream, probably to accomplish sometime in the future. Thanks for asking, David. Charity Griffin, in hindsight, what would you do differently? In hindsight, if I could have anything and everything, I would have had a radio that I could have contacted directly to any aircraft and called in death and destruction on those that were trying to kill us. Before that, I'd do everything. I wish that I could have had more access to making a difference in the security posture at the consulate. Mary Beth, would General Ham ever come forward to tell what happened, or has he? Is Benghazi one of the skeletons that General Flynn has over the Obama administration? God bless you all. Benghazi was my red pill. I have your autographed book. Mary Beth, I don't know. I don't believe General Ham has ever come forward, and I don't know that he would. I would love to meet with him someday, if for no other reason than just to thank him for what he did do. As for General Flynn, I don't think that is a skeleton that he may have, but maybe that is something that, again, maybe one day me and him will be able to discuss as well. But until General Flynn gets past all his problems, that probably won't be a conversation that we have. I can say this much, that I have met with General Flynn and talked, but what we talk about is our love for the Lord and how that there is what's needed in this country more than anything right now, is for us to start loving one another as the Lord has loved us. He puts up with each and every one of us for the way we are. We need to put up with each other. But thank you so much, Mary Beth. Vicki Douglas, Kelly, watching the battle scenes in the movie, everything seems and probably is completely chaotic. How do you have the fortitude to keep going and not let your brain shut down? Or your brain just not shut down? You know, Vicki, it's just it's training. It's you know, it's not having been there. I mean, this wasn't the first time this has kind of happened. I mean, in my career, I've spent 30 years serving this country, either in the military, law enforcement, as a contractor. And you have to remain calm in the chaos. Because if you let the chaos overtake you, you let your brain shut down, you cannot do your job. And your job is to protect others and to make sure that those brothers and sisters you have to your left and right come home as well. Nicholas. Oz, do you and Tig and Tonto keep in touch? You know, we do. Not as much maybe as a lot of people would think. You know, we've all come back. Each of us have our lives and our families that are moving on and moving past a lot of what happened in Benghazi. And some of it is, you know, getting together isn't always the easiest thing, because it does bring back some of those memories and those what ifs. But we do usually, about every year, we get together at least once on the anniversary of September 11th or September 12th, if for no other reason than to honor Ty and Glenn. Mary Beth, they seem to have purposely kept Benghazi out of the blue states like New York City. Have you had any problems with CNN and MSNBC? You you know, you're right. They have kept Benghazi out of those states. The movie, when it came out, and I think it's sad. I mean, this is a piece of history. And that's one of the reasons, the primary reasons we wrote the book is because, you know, everyone else was telling our story except for us. And we knew that it was being told wrong. And for future generations, they need to know what those who are elected officials do in our name. And they have to be held accountable. Now, again, and we as voters, we as the constituents, we as Americans must hold them accountable. We all make mistakes, and God forgives us for those, but you have to ask for that forgiveness. And you can't keep making the same mistake over and over and expect to be asked for and be forgiven each and every time. So I do wish that that the rest of the country, the other half of the country, the left, I mean, and at least see it for what it is, who made the mistakes for what it is, but they refuse to do that. Okay, one last question. It comes from my wife again. Who would win in a fight? Me, my wife, Crystal, or Hillary Clinton? She's asking for a friend. Well, I can tell you who would win in that fight. It would probably be short and sweet. I don't think I want to get in a fight with my wife, so because I'll lose myself. But I hope that answers that for everyone out there. And again, I just want to say God bless y'all. Thank you so much for joining me over the last few months, during the quarantine. And I hope that you all enjoyed this. I hope you follow us on Facebook and on social media, as well as follow us on shadowwarriorsproject.org. Share it with your friends, and anything that you guys can do to help, it is terrific. It is greatly appreciated. And as I've said each and every episode, if anyone who is willing to make a reoccurring donation of $20 a month, sign up for that, and we will be getting you a free autographed book of 13 hours. So God bless you all, and thank you so much. Again, thank you all. And you all have a wonderful weekend. God bless you, and thank you for being here. Before I go, though, I do have to mention a couple people who I got to say, give a shout out to. And first is Nana. Nana, you and your family down in Lubbock, thank you for all that you're doing with Shadow Warriors and for Shadow Warriors and for our dog program. I can't say enough how much we love you for it, how much of a difference you're making. Thank you for that, and God bless you. And I want to give a shout out to Matt. Matt is a good friend up in Canada, and I want to give a shout out to your mother and a prayer for her that she continues to fight, because she is a fighter beyond fighters. If everyone else can also continue to keep Matt and his mother in prayer. Matt's mother is suffering from cancer and is not given much time to live. And we need to say a prayer for her. And so if y'all would like, please join me right now, and let's say this together. Is Frida, you're an inspiration to all of us in your ability to fight and overcome. And Lord, watch over her and Matt and the family as she goes through these troubling times. Give her the strength to live her life to the end as you see it, as she is, proud, strong, and forever loving you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you, everyone. God bless you. And stay true, stay strong, and love the Lord.